All right, we are here. Welcome back, Coast to Coast NHL podcast. I'm here with my main man, Tori. We're here, episode 36 of our podcast now. We've been going on for over a year and a half, I think, at this point. Almost a season and a half at least. The COVID season, this season. 36 episodes, and today we are going to go over what's been going on around the NHL, mostly in the past week. And we're going to look at, I think you wanted to check in, kind of comparing the different divisions and what's going on with that. We're obviously going to go to everyone's favorite segment on the podcast, the 3 stars, and all of that fun stuff. So buckle up. Here we go.
I'm pretty sure we're going to end up doing our standing breakdown predictions next week, right? But just we're going to talk about just a couple things about the divisions a little bit this week. But where do you want to start?
We'll start with the outdoor games because they went over this past weekend. Just to touch on what you said about the standing update, we'll do that next week because I was looking at the standings and kind of realizing that we're still a few games away from most teams hitting that midpoint mark. So by next week, we might have a couple of teams hit that mark by the looks of it. So I wanted to touch base. The outdoor Lake Tahoe game took place this past weekend. It was great scenery for that first game. However, we had some issues, as usually comes in with outdoor territory. But I know for me it hasn't been the staple of these outdoor games as being ice conditions and that being so talked about. I think this is the first time we've had such a crazy postponement in that first game. So the first game we saw like 9-hour delay or something insane. Puck redrops.
Long time.
Yeah, puck redrops at midnight Eastern Standard Time. So that was definitely a first across the NHL. But I don't know, they pulled it together at least. Got the game in. Some worries that it wasn't even going to get in at that point, and I'm surprised they even got the next game in the next day, considering how the ice was. But did you watch? Did you check out the games? What do you think?
I was kind of annoyed because I legitimately sat down to watch the game, and I was a little bit late, so I kind of missed maybe a third of the first period. So I was just settling in to watch the game, and I just kind of caught what was going on, and all of a sudden there was the delay, and like it could be a bit, so I just got busy doing other stuff, and then I was asleep by the time the game continued. But one thing I thought was interesting and what I caught them talking about on the broadcast was the NHL admitted that they had to take chances this year. They really had to try and take chances and see what they could pull out of a hat, because if you think about it, this game, if it happened with fans, there would have been major problems.
Yeah,
the fact that there's no fans, it just kind of screws up the day for those two teams and the coaches and the refs and the whatever, right? So like taking a chance, seeing what they can pull off now in a time where they don't have fans is almost a good way to prepare themselves to do stuff like this when they can have fans back.
That's a good point.
In that aspect, I thought it was well done. And I think what you're saying there is like this one won't be remembered for game. It will be remembered for the ice conditions, the delay, but it will also be remembered for that ridiculous sunset the second game while they're playing. Like,
yeah, you go into that because I didn't watch too much of that second game because of Vegas was playing at the same time. I was kind of watching them, so
I was kind of doing chores and stuff at the same time, so I was not catching a lot of it. But at the same time, just the scenery during the whole thing was crazy.
Yeah.
For me, and I shouldn't even say crazy, but it's just it was beautiful. It was stunning, and the fact that they were playing with the sunset takes me back just to when I played on the pond and stuff, and like just playing till it gets dark and we almost have to go home, and like.
Yep.
I don't know. It was just really neat what was going on, because I remember in some of the old games, the lighting was an issue, which is why they wanted to play during the day. But if they can find ways to do like this and pull off situations, like I wouldn't be surprised if they start trying to do other stuff that's kind of pushing the border for outdoor games or other things like that.
Yeah, I would think the only takeaway too that I think it's kind of a shame that they have all these other games going on at the same time. I feel like it takes away from the focus that they could have potentially had because Even on the
it does, but they don't have a chance or they don't have a choice because of the scheduling, right? Like I mean, what I said to you today, Dallas plays 44 games in 77 nights or 79
Fair
nights,
enough.
which is whatever, right? To try and be like, okay, well, we're going to take another night out just so we can showcase. I think if it was a regular season, I think we would have seen that was the only game on the schedule.
Not even like on, maybe not the only game that day. I'm not looking for that, but like time-wise, they could have had that being the only game on it.
Again, what happens if it happens the same thing for people like me who legitimately sit down just to watch the game because it's a different thing, and then there's a delay? If it turns into a 2-hour, 4-hour delay, people will just get up and go and do stuff. If you have kids, if you have whatever, you got to go do stuff, right? So that's the downfall to it. But
okay, I'll give it that.
I thought it was well done. I think they were smart.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Sorry, I think
they were smart.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I think they were smart, just by how they handled it, and they really took the break in the safety of the players. Yeah. I think that was good.
They needed to do
that. But I mean, it won't be remembered for its game. It wasn't both games weren't the greatest hockey games, but it is what it is. Exploring.
Yeah.
Not always neat.
Yeah, true that. At least it's not like the other one way back in the day where it's remembered for the Crosby concussion, right? Instead of no one got hurt.
Yeah. Or the blizzard that one night.
That was a cool
Buffalo.
one.
I think who was it? Buffalo. It was cool, but not for the players. The players said they hated it, but
of course
they said it was cool. But it was also kind of like, this is how can this be counted as a normal game when, if I have a breakaway and I have to deal with snow in my eyes and a buildup of snow versus somebody who just had the cleaner go over it 2 minutes ago during commercial break, like, it's different, right?
Yeah,
so I can understand it from the players' aspect.
Yeah, for sure. All right, this past week we had the David Aries anniversary, so that was exciting. I showed you too that Steve Dangle himself took on Aries in a shootout competition, managing to sneak a couple past him.
I'm pretty sure it's Ayres. I think it's Ayres.
Okay.
I think so.
Sorry.
I just wanted to correct you if that's true.
All right, David Ayres. I think you're right.
I could be wrong. There we go.
David Ayres, yeah. So there's a lot of hype around it, at least on the Twitter universe. Media taking advantage of it. I'm sure with you in Toronto, they were probably talking about it again. But yeah, I guess the Leafs have come a long way since 1 year ago when they're losing their backup goalie or Zamboni driver.
I mean, speaking from a Leaf fan perspective, like, it's a pretty scarring moment, but if you really put it in comparison to what happened to Boston in the playoffs, it's nothing. It's just a little scrape on the skin.
Do you think this is something we'll be talking about every year for, like, this is it?
Well, apparently they're making a movie about it. So yes, I think that's serious. Disney has written up a movie for it. So it's going to be a Disney movie because they're also talking about it, joking on the Steve Dangle podcast, saying they're joking who was going to play Steve in the movie, being like the crazy Leaf fan that's screaming into the camera. But anyways, it's going to be talked about forever because it's one of those things that's so obsolete and so
man, he's got his own hockey card for Upper Deck too, and like Young moment card. It actually sells fairly well.
But like the thing that I think really needs to be broken down when people talk about it is people always say you got beat by a Zamboni driver, overlooking the fact that he still has skill.
Still a goalie,
Still probably one of the most skilled goalies you would ever shoot against as any normal hockey player.
Yep.
So, like, it's not like he literally just came off the Zamboni, put pads on, and was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Wow, I happen to win. Like, this guy, I know that this guy basically plays like 2 or 3 games like a day. This guy travels around. This guy is the Marlies backup. This guy is the, like when the Marlies goalies are banged up, or the Leafs goalies are banged up, he would come on the ice and take the shots because the other guy's getting an ice bath or whatever's happening, right?
Yeah.
He just happened to be around and got the call, but he also played pickup with guys I know. So it's like, he's just a guy that plays hockey and loves to play hockey, and he happened to be at the right place at the right time. And it's like, clearly he's not an NHL goalie, but it would be the equivalent of like an ECHL goalie that's old playing in the NHL. Like, it's not crazy. It's just crazy how it happened.
Yeah, it's not your drunken father on weekends that is a Zamboni driver full-time job that basically only plays beer league. Like, it's really not.
Yeah.
It's not so. Yeah, it's definitely overhyped a little bit, that aspect for sure. But
yeah, but I think the bigger aspect about the game is the fact that the Leafs were ahead. He came in and they lost. I think that's the biggest part of the storyline, which is true. It was embarrassing. Like, the loss was embarrassing regardless of who was in net. The fact he was in net and made key saves at key times versus key players makes it the Disney story. Like, I don't know. I think that some people go a little too far saying like there needs to be some sort of explanation or some sort of resolve to the issue. Because like the reason we're talking about it, the reason that there might be a movie about it, or sounds like there's going to be a movie about it, is because it's never happened before.
yeah,
It happened more often, there'd be a solution to it. And I don't think there needs to be a solution to it, because even moving forward with goalies and sports science and all these things saying like they can go, they can't go, like different things like that, especially with emergency goalie pull-up availability, specifically if your AHL team is close, you can easily an hour before the game let the guy out of the game and have two healthy goalies. Worst case, you put him back up, and chances are not both of them are going to get. We got to remember, Kyle Clifford, I don't want to say ran the goalie because the goalie was out at the top of the circle, but we have to remember that he ran into Clifford moving heavy, like he's a freight train. He skated right through the goalie, and he took him out. Had that play not happened, that goalie, Mrazek, I'm pretty sure it was, would have never been out of the game, which means this never would have been a storyline, and the Leafs probably would have won that game big. Because it's another normal game. They were up.
Yeah,
they didn't have it. Whatever.
Yeah, we'll never
know.
These
crazy things happen, and it was just
I would at the same time, I think Steve Dangle himself, and just like the clout and the video and all that, gave it a little bit extra juice to it as well. Like, I will give him a little bit of credit in the fact that it's just like second most watched video now. Like, he had the following, and then he made a good video reacting to it, which gave it even more hype and more media coverage and all that stuff. So props to him.
The thing with the Leaf fans, and there's so many of them, that there's so many different opinions, that generally most topics have a battlefront.
Yeah.
Where maybe it's 30-70, maybe it's 50-50, maybe it's 60-40, we don't know, but some sort of battle. This was one of the few times where everyone pretty much was on the exact same page, and I feel like everyone was feeling through Steve, and everything that people wanted to say and scream at somebody that would listen was like, you're doing it for me, to people that will listen.
And they can just share it, and this is,
this is how I feel. He's screaming for me. He summed it up better than I would have, because I probably would have put swear words and stuff in it.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff, right? So, like, I think that's why it also did so successful. But, I mean, he's good at what he does, right? So like it was a perfect storm, and like I think it's fantastic for him.
For sure. Awesome. Let's stick with this Leafs kind of segue here towards this. I know we went on a crazy rant last week with this goalie interference, and sure enough, the same kind of thing came up again. In this, I guess it's not the same. The Leafs aren't in the game. Is Ottawa
same realm of goaltender issues, but slightly different issue itself.
So I know probably it's not. I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's what it looked like. But you had indicated that is essentially the same kind of goal. So do you want to take it away and
So basically, what happened was Gallagher was coming from the corner towards the front post, the short side post, and the defenseman kind of pinched him off, and he had that quick time decision of, do I bail on this play, or do I try and kind of just squeeze through? And Gallagher tried to squeeze through. He wasn't trying to like also make a play on the puck. He was just trying to be like, I'm aware I'm in a bad spot. I need to get out of here. And he's kind of just like trying to dance out of the spot. And in doing so, he kind of clipped Matt Murray. And Matt Murray spun. Then he spun again. In the time that he did the two spins, well, the half spin and the full spin, the puck went out to the one point, across to the other point, and shot back in.
Okay.
It had a overlay in the top corner of the slow motion time countdown, and it was 4.7 or 4.4 seconds from the time Gallagher touched him to the time the puck went in the net. So that's basically saying he has 4 seconds to go from contact with Gallagher to, okay, I got the puck, reset, ready to play.
Okay.
So the concern was, and the call that they compared it to, and what Gallagher said himself, is we're sent videos by the NHL to know, these are the types of things. Here's the borders. Here's what you'll do to get a penalty. And they compared it to a play with Freddie Anderson versus Anders Lee and the New York Islanders last year. And if you watch the play, you watch the play, Anders Lee kind of bumped into Freddie, and it was one of those situations where, as a goalie, you always have the weight kind of either flat or towards the front. Mm-hmm. You never have the weight on your heels because then you fall back and now you can't make your save, right? So Freddie kind of started falling back, and he tried to grab the post, but he still fell back into the net on his butt. From Freddie's position, you're like, you got to hurry up and get up. From the skill of today's players, if he had bailed on, okay, the shot's behind me over my shoulder to try and get up, the guy behind the net easily would have put off his button in. The players have that skill nowadays, right? Yeah. To be like, oh, I can put off your ass and in or off the back of your leg and in. So he waited. Then they passed it out front, and the guy shot it, and it went in. I agree, should have been a goal. It sucks. It was one of those situations I feel it was interference. He had enough time to reset. Because he was falling off balance, it is what it is. That variance that I've referred to, where sometimes you have to make a call that makes sense. In that particular case, that makes sense. What Brendan Gallagher said is, okay, well, if you have more than 4 seconds to reset, if you're a goalie now and you feel anything, you're just going to be like,
yeah.
Oh, it went in? Oh, well, I didn't have time to reset. And then we're going to challenge every goal.
Yeah.
Like, where's the line?
I thought when you first brought this up in the group, I thought this was a pad pushing goal that was like complete already 1 week later, exact same. I thought it was that kind of goal again.
So that goal I'm talking about was between Montreal and Ottawa. Mm-hmm. The goal I brought up, the other one was between Toronto and I think it was Toronto and Montreal, mm-hmm. and it was the exact same thing. This is what I want to talk about. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so basically, they similar play to what happened where I was losing my mind about Joe Thornton pushing the pad in. It was almost the exact same situation with, I believe it was Brendan Gallagher, and he came in. However, there was a little bit of a scrum, and he kind of came in being like, there it is. And he kind of shoveled it in. A typical Brendan Gallagher type goal, right? Or a majority of his goals. Yeah. So he came in, or one in the playoffs, we'd be like, damn, that's why he's Brendan Gallagher. That's why he's Mr. You know what I mean? Exact type of goal he'd be praised for. And in doing so, when he kind of shoveled it in, he pushed Freddie's pad at the same time. And as Freddie's kind of trying to go back, he got spun while it was happening. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I'm like, going by the logic of you can't push the pad. I disagreed with the term, but that's what it is, right? So it's going to push the pad. So in this exact same situation, I said, he pushed the pad. It's easy. It's no goal. It's funny because they panned up to Dubas up in the stands. Went to video review. They reviewed the goal. They called it a goal. But then they went to Keefe and he said, well, no, I'm challenging this. Like, we had the exact same goal pushback. I'm challenging it. So they challenged it. They went to the NHL's office and then they overturned it.
Oh, so no goal.
No goal. So my question at that point is, let's say that's the last minute of the game. And now you're forcing Keefe to challenge. And you don't know because one was and one wasn't. And now you're like, well, I don't want to risk it because if I fail my challenge, now I'm on the penalty kill, right? Mm-hmm. So they, in essence, made the coach risk something by challenging it after the NHL already reviewed it. And it was a different answer each time.
So wait,
to me, that doesn't make sense.
The NHL reviewed it, called it a goal?
And then called it a goal. Yeah. It went upstairs. They reviewed it.
Okay.
Called it a goal. It was official. They went to go drop the puck. The Leafs challenged it, reviewed it again, which this time they then overturned it.
I don't know. Like, maybe does the NHL not review when they go upstairs after a goal, do they not review that specific rule as part of it, or are they just trying to review that it went in?
That was part of the debate of what I was involved with was if they go upstairs to be like, did the puck go in, yes or no?
Then
if that was why they went up, okay, fine. Because you were determined did it go in or not. Yeah, that way you answered it.
Yeah, you're right. Like, this is just getting
you
messy.
allowed to, at the same time, just be like, it did go in. However, let's not waste people's time. No goal. Precedent from last week. No goal, no goal. Drop the puck, no goal.
Yeah, it's getting sloppy,
Why didn't they do that?
It's sloppy.
And exactly what I said with the challenging of the plays. Like, imagine that's in a playoff game or late in the game, or exactly what happened in Leaf games with Calgary when Willie Nylander had a similar-ish type goal. This one, if it had to fall on one side, I would have fallen on all three of them. Should have been goals.
Yeah, it's
the record.
Definitely with these kind of goals too. They're so hard to be black and white push pad. Like, if they're starting to call these gray areas no goals every time, when before they were calling them goals very often, like we talked about last week, then it's only a matter of time before we get a foot in the crease kind of bull crap situation.
Why do we still talk about Brett Hull today?
Because of what it is, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So do we want to be doing this for the next 10 years about something that happens this upcoming playoffs?
I hope not.
If it's my team, I'm going to be fucking pissed. It's your team, you're going to be, and you have right to be, right? And that's what I've been calling for this whole time. Like, had they called that precedent, had they challenged the play, they would have had to create that file, the video, send it out to the team saying this isn't. A couple games later, it's still as confusing. Players are frustrated. It could have potentially added a layer onto why a coach lost his job. The NHL, come on.
Oh yeah, good point. I forgot about that.
Take some ownership here. Like, fuck.
So Montreal fired their coach this week.
Yeah.
I did not see that coming, to be honest.
And neither.
I'm surprised.
And neither.
I guess it really shows that how serious this team is about the expectations around them.
Bergevin.
Pardon?
This was the last card Bergevin has. GM. If he can't get the coach to get this team going, he's done at the end of the season, because they were supposed to take the step this year, right? It set everything up for this year. The Jake Allen trade, the Josh Anderson trade, keeping Drouin, getting Domi, like all these different things they did setting up for this year, signing Edmondson, signing who's the other defenseman that they got? They're big defensemen. So like
Petrie, Weber, like yeah. And
I don't know.
We'll get to it in a second. Well, let's do it. Let's transition into these like the divisions, the weaker, stronger divisions, and kind of just we'll start with, we're already here, the North Division. Like, it's coming down to certain, like, it's tighter. Like, these final spots in almost all the divisions are super tight. Like, there isn't a lot of teams that are out of the race, at least at this point. And there's a lot of teams that we talked about that we didn't think would make the playoffs, that they're still in the hunt. So, like, with the North, basically, well, the North might be an exception. It might be one of the I would probably rate it as one of the weaker divisions so far, whereas it's top heavy and it's bottom heavy. We got two teams that have been pretty weak, and then we have one team in my eyes that's strong.
See, I think there's two parts to the argument. I think there's a part of the argument that we have 7 teams in the division.
Yeah.
So when you do play a weaker team, you play that weaker team one extra time.
Fair enough.
So from that part of the aspect, I can understand. I agree that. I agree. But in terms of saying as a blanket that the Canadian division is weaker, or more so the Leafs' success is in result of, one argument I heard on the radio that really just has stood out for me was just basically like I totally lost the train of thought.
I'm not saying that the Leafs' success is because I just think the discrepancy, like they're by far the best team in my mind, and then we have, and then it falls off pretty quickly after that. It isn't like last season. If we looked at the win percentage of the division as a whole, the North Division was the lowest out of all the divisions at the beginning of the season. So it's not surprising to see that that being the way it is. For me, I don't know. What do you have a different perspective of where you think the weaker divisions potentially are?
I mean, I think that what I was going to say is that basically in seasons past, each conference still or each division still had their weak teams.
Yeah.
When the Leafs specifically had to play Boston and Tampa, they also got to play the Buffaloes and the Detroits. So
Yeah.
to say that their division is weaker and that's the result of their success, I can also understand the part of the aspect that they don't have the Boston or Tampa in the division.
True.
But that being said, I don't think it should be discounted because I don't think Ottawa's an easy out, and they've proved that. They've beaten Montreal, they've beaten Edmonton, they've beaten Toronto. They not a lot. They've almost taken down each team in the Northern Division, and I think they're only going to start playing better. We've seen it a million times with these young teams who basically come in and they struggle the first little bit, and then once the pressure's off and they don't have to do anything, all of a sudden everybody takes off and they're spoilers and they play great. We've seen it a million times.
Yeah.
So like, there's nothing saying the Ottawa Senators aren't going to steal 20 points here on out from all the teams, depending on who loses the points.
And when they're playing tougher teams day in day out, more often, like it's bang 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 bang. They're playing games more often than usual. They're getting the practice. They're getting in those dicey situations more often, more quickly. It's like rapid fire practice, really. Like, so.
Yeah. And the other thing that I'm getting annoyed hearing the conversation about is how it's great for Toronto to be doing this against these teams, but they haven't played against an Islanders, or they haven't played against a Boston, or they haven't played against a Washington. Like they don't have a chance against these teams. What I have to say in answer to that is, well, they haven't played Toronto. They haven't played the best team in the league. They haven't played the highest scoring team in the league. I believe they're highest scoring anyways, or top 3, whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of the top power play teams. Like, they haven't played. Like, yeah, Washington is Washington, and yeah, there's some other skilled teams, but there's no Torontos in those other divisions. And I don't know, it might not match up in playoffs. It's a different beast. It might be terrible. It might not work at all. But my point is Boston will not play a team like Toronto. Yes, Boston's beat Toronto in the past. If they happen to come up against each other, you can't sit there and tell me that it's going to go in Boston's favor.
Definitely,
because we don't know which way this year's going to go.
56 games throughout the season, not against a high octane kind of offense like Edmonton potentially, Toronto, Colorado, Vegas, those kind of teams, then they're not going to be ready. They might not have the practice, the game plan to defend against those kind of teams. Those teams might be able to find the holes even more than they would against the teams like Vegas and that.
I mean, they're different though. Vegas is a different beast.
Yeah, I'm just like, even just playing the same teams over and over, you're starting to see it even in the West, is that their games are starting to be lower scoring and like close games, because these teams are adapting to the style. You got the Coyotes, you got the Ducks, you got the Kings playing this kind of style of hockey that's kind of slowing Vegas down. And maybe other teams like the scouting departments are going to have big jobs on their hands to, like, when it comes playoff time and they finally cross. I guess it'll only be Final Four, but there'll be a lot of footage that they can break down against different styles that have worked and against different teams and how they've adapted and maybe what worked and what didn't. It's going to be kind of crazy.
And I think we touched on this before about how this is a time for the NHL to make changes and potentially make alterations to the way they do things. Like, why not open that up to every aspect? Look at different things. Like, I know I suggested 3-point games, which I really like.
I like it too.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to talk about any of the rest of these divisions or the week? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't watched a whole ton of hockey outside the Canadian division. I watched the teams for my fantasy guys. So I know a little bit here and there. I know there's some teams that we thought were going to be good in Nashville and weren't. And I had watched a couple of their games early. And when I realized they can't score, I realized they weren't going to be that good.
Yeah, me too. But they're definitely on my power rankings when we'll get into it next week or not. My prediction there was just out to lunch. apparently.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I guess so. Let's talk about the Rangers specifically then. Let's just jump into them. They've had an interesting season so far. I don't think they're really having the season that they wanted. Panarin this week, basically on hiatus. I don't think they've decided how long at this point. Some news coming out. It's hard to say what really happened here, but allegations something like 10 years ago, basically, that he was abused, assaulted, potentially a young woman when he was in Latvia for some tournament or whatnot. It's hard to say because Panarin has been very vocal against the government in Russia, so there's conspiracy theories all around about what's going on here. Like, and you always got to be careful when you, from what we know, come out talking about Mr. Putin.
Yeah.
You might jump out a window or something. But
yeah, and that's, I mean, I think we all kind of have suspicions and all kind of, especially in the atmosphere of which is 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
Of people kind of seeing through the bullshit. I think people are, or at least questioning more stuff. I think people now are more prepared to believe a Panarin saying he's not guilty, at least giving him a chance to defend himself. Where I think if this was 2 years ago, I think it might have been a lot of backlash directed directly at Panarin.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where people are kind of talking from it. Like, is this a ploy that's backfiring, or is it something dirty that's coming up from the past? And
I don't know. I would think honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's Russian and what he said, and the fact that this story comes out now, and just I would think if this is just like a North American boy with a American woman kind of story, it might be like, do we listen to him a bit more? I think people are definitely bred in this culture to kind of be more questionable when it comes to things coming out of Russia and Latvia and those kind of areas. But if it's a news story that broke in America, are we giving him the same benefit of the doubt when he denies the claims? I'm not so sure.
yeah, and I mean, like, generally speaking, I mean, it's hard for somebody that, I mean, this is probably not the most fair thing to say, but if you're guilty of a lot of things, you don't usually run towards the spotlight. And for me, for him, from hearing what he's always talked about, from being in Chicago to being in Columbus to now being in Rangers, like, he basically always insinuated he wanted to be in New York. He wanted to be in the busy city of New York. Like, that's where he dreamed of being as a kid.
Yep.
Said he never wanted to go back to Russia. He doesn't want to play for Russia. He doesn't want to return to Russia. Like, he wants to be in New York and be on the spotlight. So, like, not that one can't direct to the other, but just like you would think that,
Valid.
you know, if he was guilty of stuff, maybe he would have liked to prefer to stay in Columbus or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that has something to do with it. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah. But
Might not be fair to say that, but I don't know.
It's unfortunate. It's bad timing for the Rangers all around. They've not had the season that they wanted. They lost some defensemen. They're basically running out of an AHL lineup on defense these days. It's been rough spotlight all around when it comes to the Rangers. I think they're going to be one of the teams that might be looking forward a little bit to the off season now. But of course, they're professionals. They're going to still try to make the playoffs. But already in this really tough division that we've hit on before, it's unfortunate. Definitely because now that I'm a Shesterkin fantasy owner myself, I've been watching him a lot, and I think he's got some potential to be a good goalie. Like, I've been watching him, and they've been relying on him like crazy. So it's unfortunate.
They've got two good young goalies. I like both of their goalies. It's going to be a good tandem for them for years. The thing I'm worried about with the Rangers, like, I was optimistic. I actually put them on the same level as Vancouver. I think I said that in one of the first podcasts, is that
potentially, yeah,
they're both either going to be as good as we think, or they're both going to be not as good as we think, just because I linked a lot of similarities myself between them.
Yeah.
And I feel like Rangers, if you look at the cap that they have and the dead cap that they have a lot of dead cap from buyouts and trade retentions and stuff like that. So, like,
okay,
I basically figured if they're good as they are now, that's great because they're young. They can deal with the cap adventures the next 3 years or so. But now it shows they're not there yet, and they need to continue to add pieces. And it's hard to add pieces that aren't being paid because that's meaning you're adding prospects or young roster players, which are the most valuable of stuff. So yeah, you could go out and spend some of your internal assets to get young players, but that seems kind of counterintuitive. So you have to go and spend more money, which you don't have the space for. So like it almost seems like they could be a Buffalo and plateau at a certain point. Just need to break through that plateau, and that's what I'm worried about.
They're still for me it's those two big draft picks that they've got the past 2 years in Kako and Lafreniere. Yeah. They've been quiet this season, and rightfully so. It's just for Alex. It's his first season. It's been a crappy way to kind of enter into the NHL himself, and it's going to be hard to really get the ground running. Not a lot of rookies having like amazing, like we must watch kind of seasons right now, and it's a big league. It's a big adjustment. So hopefully, those guys will turn into something more that they felt like they got when. Sorry, what?
I was just gonna say I feel like it's gonna be really hard this year for the trade deadline and projections into how teams might look next year and picks and stuff like that, trading picks, assessing the true value of picks. Like there's so many things going into that. Like, do we know there's a full season next year? No. Do we know what the divisions could look like? No. Do we know if there's going to be a draft this year? No. Could there be 2 draft years next year? Maybe. So like all these variables could change people's opinions on values of stuff like that.
And on top of that, we have the Kraken.
The Kraken coming up. Yeah. Plus on top of that, you have to take into question if they're going from Canada to the States, the quarantine time. So like if you're agreeing to for a trade right now, you're not getting them for 5 or 8 games. Yeah. So are you paying less or are you paying more to get them earlier? Or how does that dynamic work? And like what I'm worried about is there's gonna be 3 or 4 teams who miss value what this season means. And it could just be a lull, or it could be a team like Florida or something who's just doing really well. I don't think that's the case, but I'm just using them as example. That overvalues a certain thing, and then they'll commit to it in the next several years after expansion. There'll be 4 or 5 teams that will just be screwed because of this short-term thing that happened.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what teams they are, and if they happen to be the teams that are struggling financially, we could see a situation where there's a lot of relocation or some sort of partnership deals of some capacity. It's a weird situation. Like honestly, how long is Arizona gonna stay in Arizona?
Who knows?
Like
maybe forever though.
It doesn't have.
Could happen.
Has potential, but I don't think it has sustainability. So unless you have both, I don't think you have success. So
yeah.
I don't know. I'm worried about them, but they'll be in Quebec or Hamilton soon enough.
Yeah, right. All right. What else do we got?
Is it time?
Yeah, pretty much I think hits all the topics that we had. So that brings us to our favorite segment, the 3 stars of the week. So this week, you got the benefit of going first. I'd taken that away from you for the first 5 weeks or whatever. By saying that, I mean like we're trying to have essentially 6 different players getting some props here. So if we both had ours, we'd probably have. I think this week we would have had one guy that was the same either way. So I'll let you lead us off since you have. You went first in our picks.
First. Well, for me, my 3rd star I picked was my boy Vasilevsky.
Yeah.
He had one not so great game where he gave up 3 goals, but he played 3 games against Carolina. Carolina is, I believe, a top 5 team, top 6 team in the league, top 2 in their division right now, along with Florida. Or top 3, I guess, would be Florida and Tampa. But he only gave up 5 goals in 3 games, considering he gave up 3 in the one game. He got a shutout in the other game, so it's a pretty dynamic week for him, and he's very carrying me quite far in my fantasy leagues, so he's my boy.
So a little bit of extra love for him, for right there, right?
Sure.
Yeah. All right.
Anything you want to add on Vasi?
No, he's just the best goalie on probably one of the best teams right now. He's definitely been carrying the load. I think McElhinney's getting his second ever start of the season today. So
I think so, yeah.
he's been all around, like we've touched on before. He's like by far the leading candidate for the Vezina at this point. Just playing
because of workload. Like he's gonna play 20 more games than the next best goalie, I think. Maybe outside of Lankinen in Chicago, but
yeah. There's a couple goalies that I think will play the majority of their team. Not many though, like a handful.
Yeah.
Colorado's had their backup play twice too. St. Louis is only a couple times.
That's also because their backup is injured.
Yeah, that's a good point. Once Francouz comes back, that could be a whole different story. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see when that happens. It doesn't seem like it's soon.
Nope.
So for my second star, I went with another goalie. Surprise, surprise. Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yep.
I have him in my other pool, and he's currently kicking your butt, so you're familiar with him in the other league. He did only go 1-1, but it was both games against Colorado, and he got a shutout. So 3 goals against in one game, shutout against the other game, 1-1. So I think it was a 3-2 final loss, and I want to say overtime or shootout was his loss, and then the shutout win. So I thought he deserved some props there.
Yeah, and to be fair too, like he's taken over for Lehner, who's been hurt. So he's been going every game since Lehner went out. They'd been alternating at the beginning, but now he's got the net at least until Lehner comes back. And just because I see more of him than most people, he's been. This feels like old Fleury. Like he is playing unreal. He's had, what was it, when he was playing Colorado the last game, 2 unbelievable saves, like just making unbelievable saves, like each game. Like it's definitely the Stanley Cup kind of Fleury that we've known in the past. I know last season I wasn't too high on him. He was definitely, if not the reason they were struggling at certain times, and that's why they went out and got Robin Lehner. So to see him back in his form, maybe it took this whole fiasco with the new coach and everything to go down, but I don't know what he's got in his Wheaties right now, but keep eating them.
Yeah, for sure. I think that might have been one of my only errors in the fantasy season, just passing up on him. But in fairness, everyone did. He was a free agent, so
yeah.
But I think if you have 3 finalists for Vezina, I think that you have to have Fleury and Vasilevsky in that conversation.
Definitely.
And for the first star for me, this is the easiest one I think of maybe.
Yeah, it's the one we agreed on.
But definitely of the week. Yeah, it's Austin Matthews, which it sounds like he's doing this with a banged up, however you want to say it, wrist. So it's not doing so hot. We were taping it the other day, and I don't know if you saw the fall where he went into the boards. I didn't really love that. I thought it was a bit of a cheap shot. But outside of that, he has 10 points in 4 games. I know 4 games isn't really a week, but what was in the last 7 days in terms of the fantasy counter. So it's kind of cheating, but still. 10 points in 4 games. And that's pretty impressive considering he had 0 goals in his last 2. So 10 points in his last 4 games with no goals in his last 2 is pretty impressive.
Yeah, the Leafs have been continuing to roll for the most part, right? So
yeah, they've got so many injuries and they're still finding ways to win. So that's good news.
All right, awesome. So for my 3 stars here, my third star I'm giving out to Brady Tkachuk, mostly to his last 2 games. Ottawa won; they upset the Habs 2 games in a row here, and right now they're beating Calgary, so potentially 3 in a row. But in the last 2 games alone, Brady Tkachuk 3 goals, 1 assist, 1 game-winning goal, and I believe it was in overtime.
Think so.
12 shots and 12 hits. So this guy is just a force whenever he's on the ice. Typical Tkachuk fashion, playing like his dad, playing like his brother. It's great. These guys are fun to watch. So I'm giving it to him. And I wanted to give some props to the Ottawa Senators for upsetting the Montreal Habs and resulting basically in a coach losing his job. So there it is. My second star of the week is going to LA Kings, Jonathan Quick. 2-0 last week, one goal against, one shutout. The Kings are on a roll themselves. Kyle Peterson as well, playing solid, but this one going to Quick because, yeah, I think the Kings have won now 4 in a row as well, unless I think they might have lost last night, actually, 3-2, but they were on a roll too.
I think they did.
And honestly, it's a lot to do with their goalies keeping these games scoring low, and Jonathan Quick. Is he back to Quick back in the day? Probably not. But
I think with Quick, I think you can get Quick or most of what you hope you can get out of him, or 40 games, maybe 5 games. To expect to get him for 65.
But that's perfect for that. The Kings, that's all they want from Kick with Peterson right in the back.
I know you're a fan of Peterson, but I don't think he's good. I don't think he's a good fit in that other half of that tandem for LA. I think one of those two pieces has to move out for the proper piece to move in.
Okay. Potentially.
Logically, it seems like Pedersen for me, just because that's the easier one to move out.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I don't think LA can take another step forward with both those goalies. I don't love situations where it's like the old guy who still wants the net, the young guy who's trying to earn the net.
Like what the Rangers had to deal with last year, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Usually those situations don't turn out amazing for one of the players.
Yeah.
And if it's the prospect, you've just ruined one of your prospects in the pipes that you spent years to develop.
Yeah, for sure. And that's interesting because that brings me to my first star of the week, Kaapo Kähkönen, whatever. But it's kind of that same situation, except Minnesota got rid of their goalies in front of him. So this net is potentially his for the keeping right now. Minnesota is on a tear. They've won 5 in a row since coming back from their COVID outbreak situation. 4 in a row, sorry. But Kähkönen,
I think it is. Yeah.
Kähkönen has all 4 wins, .945 save percentage. I had to give it to him, and mainly too because I want to give props to the Wild, who are making this race in the West for the 4th, 3rd spot interesting. I know at the beginning of the season
that was one thing I kind of wanted to cheat and ask you is I think we agree on the top 3: Colorado, Vegas, St. Louis. I'm pretty sure we agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the next 2, and who is the one you're favoriting in that division?
So for me, at the beginning of the season, my 4th was Minnesota, so I'm going to stick with that for now. My 5th it's been upgraded. It is the Kings. So these 2 stars here kind of go in line with them, with where I see the teams in the rankings overall. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if both these teams can get in and one of the other teams miss out, just because the season's so short and anything can happen. Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's true. And the other thing that I think is going to be interesting, specifically with St. Louis, is I think you're seeing the struggle a little bit from the transition from Pietrangelo to Krug, and then giving more time to Parayko and having Hoffman come in. They clearly weren't in sync, and I'm pretty sure you probably watched a bit more of their games than I have. But just watching the highlights, I could tell they weren't. Maybe one of the lines was going, but not the whole team. And where I'm going with this is once Tarasenko comes back, I've talked about this before. When you have a guy at the top of the order that pushes everyone else down, sometimes there's an adaptation phase.
Yeah.
And that adaptation phase, if it's 7 games in a normal season, really big deal. It's a couple weeks, right?
It took Hoffman.
But here, it's a big deal.
It took Hoffman a while to get going, but it looks like he's starting to get going for them. Maybe he will see him in the 3 stars of the week some point coming up.
Maybe.
But yeah, that basically wraps up our 3 stars of the week. Both of us. Goalies, lots of goalies this week. No love for the defensemen. But you gotta. It's hard to stand out as a defenseman.
It's hard.
Right? It is.
It is. Yeah. Like the only way that I feel a defenseman's gonna get the props is if it's a guy who like happens to get in a fight, or a guy who gets like 8 blocks in one game and
does
scores the game winner or something
noticeable.
like.
Just like 4 points in like 8 points in like 2 games, kind of like really noticeable. Like it's hard, unfortunate, because there are a bunch of solid defensemen out in the league that obviously make huge impacts for their teams on a day in day out basis. But in a league when it comes down to scoring and goaltending, it's hard.
Yeah, I feel like there's a couple defense moving forward that might get the call. Like for example, I think Hedman might find his name pop up again.
Yeah, I look every week to see if I can justify, but I can't.
A defenseman, yeah. I feel like there's going to be a week out there or a couple of games where Dumba goes off and gets his traditional, 4 or 5 goals in a week, and 1 or 2 of them are game winners or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he always does that every year. He has a hot run, so I could see something like that. But unless like Brent Burns like has a week, or like Letang has a week, or like Morgan Riley has a week or something like that, maybe an Ekblad. Outside of that, like you're kind of running options thin a little bit on the D side.
Definitely. It's getting that time of the podcast where Milo wakes up and starts being a burpy mother trucker over there. So it's right on schedule, it seems like. Right around shortly after 5, he's like, all right, I've slept all day beside you. It's time to
finally do my stuff.
I'm going to go sleep on the couch instead. Like, come on. But, all right. Anything else you want, or you want to go watch some hockey out there?
Probably gonna go watch some hockey, but I've been trying to do my typical yearly breakdown of a list of guys that I see potentially being traded, and then trying to see where they might kind of fit in. I'm not gonna lie, I might not do it really this year because it's just so hard to know between no trade contracts, between bonuses, between things that we don't know.
Yeah.
Like maybe NHLs are aware of there's a cap compliance buyout or some sort of money release valve that they've come up with that we aren't aware of. So like there's so many different factors that I think we might see a couple trades interdivision.
Yeah.
Like a Buffalo or Jersey might send somebody in their division, a couple players.
Yeah, it's got to be teams that are both out of it, though, too. Or not both out of it, like one out of it, one not out of it. Because you're not going to trade for someone and then see them in the playoffs. Like, that's not going to happen.
And I think that part of that, too, that suggests that's going to be the case is look how many names we've seen on waivers this year. And, like, 95% of them have cleared, or, like, 98% of them. There's been, like, hundreds of names on the waiver wire. So, like, it's starting to make me believe that there's almost somewhat of a gentleman's agreement being like, unless you really, really need a guy, like don't screw them over. We don't care about the roster spot ourselves, but don't name a guy, make him sit 10 days, then be like, oh, we don't really need you, assign you to AHL, you have to sit there 10 days, and then we waive you, and then you have to sit there 10 days. Like, that's kind of unfair to the player. So I think that that's kind of where it's coming from. But it will be interesting moving forward to see the bigger names or even the complementary players that we're seeing, see where they end up. Like, I think we're going to start to see some action. People are going to start to want to fill some holes if they think they're a good enough team. So
definitely.
There's going to be some sort of trade to talk about by this time.
Hopefully, we'll get some by next week. I'm not so sure, but maybe. All right.
Feeling.
All right, let's wrap it up. Take care.
Cool.
Bye.
Later.